Everything you hear from me is true, unlike most of my colleagues in the airline industry. I like to tell the truth, but the reason I hadn't actually planned to apply to Aer Lingus, but there was a postal strike in Ireland in 1979, and Aer Lingus put an ad in one of the papers that said if you hadn't sent in your application, they may not have received it because of the postal strike. So you could just turn up on the day for aptitude testing. And one of the guys in my class saw this, and everybody in the class decided we'd apply for the job. So we all went and did aptitude testing, which took about 3 hours in the morning, and then, I don't know, I think we went playing football in the afternoon. So I was quite surprised to get called for an interview. And went through the process, 17 years of age. I was still in school, did the whole process while I was still in school. So I had no pressure. And I tell the story because it is fun. When I became CEO of Aer Lingus, one of the great things about being CEO, as Stephen knows, and Sean, where's Sean? Sean is there. You can pretty much get access to anything you want. So I went and got the interview files, the original interview files. Because I was curious as to what they said about me. And one of the guys who interviewed me was still employed at Aer Lingus.
At that point?
At that point, yeah. He retired shortly after my appointment as CEO. So I did this final interview, and there were 5 people, 2 from, I think they were called the personnel department back in those days, 2 pilots and a psychologist who sat there smoking a pipe through the whole interview, never said a word. But one of the pilots, his first question to me was, have you ever heard of a gyroscope? And I said, oh yeah, I have, yeah. And he said, what is it? I said, no idea. So he said, you said you knew what it was. I said, no, you asked me had I heard of one. I've heard of it, I don't know what it is. So 4 people laughed, and one person said, okay. So the 2 of us went at one another for a while. And when I picked up the interview notes, I got through in a 4-1 vote. And 4 of them said things like, very, very confident young man. This man will have no problem. And this guy said, cocky little bastard. So I think he's enjoying his retirement. We've been together for 18 years. 18, yeah. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I started flying on the 737-200, which, when I look at the aircraft that we're operating today, the 737-200 was a very, very basic aircraft. I think Steve Hazy probably sold it to us, or sold it to us, leased it back, and then sold it to us again, and we're probably still paying for it. Sean, you should check actually. I think I came into aviation actually at a time when, as a pilot, you had to fly the airplane. It's very different today. I think, to be honest, having gone through this career in aviation, the aircraft we have today are just fantastic and so much safer, to operate from a flying point of view, and clearly so much more economical as well. But yeah, so 18 years and thoroughly enjoyed it. I was telling the guys, the last aircraft I flew was actually a Eurofighter Typhoon. So when you get an opportunity to fly something like that, it's time to hang up your wings. So classic cases of when you're flying, and back then, I'm not going to say the flying job is an easy job, but you have a lot of time off, and I felt I needed to do something else. And I remember having a row with one of my pals about the pilots' union. It was the classic case of, he said to me, well, if you think you can do a better job, why don't you put yourself forward for election? And foolishly I did. So I stood for election as a representative of the pilots' union, got elected, and spent 6 years as a representative of IALPA. And through that, I engaged with the management team at Aer Lingus, and it was through that got interested in the business. And after I stood down from that, they approached me and said, you've been a really terrible bastard to deal with, why don't you come to this side of the table? So I did that, and so it wasn't by design that I got involved in the management side of the business, but thoroughly enjoy it. It is, flying is a great job, but the managing side of the business is just so more challenging, and I found that very stimulating and really enjoyed. I really enjoyed my time at Aer Lingus, and what people don't remember, it was probably my first day as CEO in Aer Lingus, I received a letter from the Minister for Transport who instructed me to engage in a process to sell the airline. I was actually told by the minister, the shareholder, to make whatever arrangements were necessary to sell the airline. And I remember talking to Tom Mulcahy, who was the chairman, and I said to him, this is mad. Now's the worst time in the world to try and sell the airline, because all people will be interested in buying are some of the assets that have value. Heathrow slots, for example. I suppose it started a train that I refused the instruction of the minister to do that. And my argument was, we'll turn the airline around, it'll become more successful, and then we'll sell the airline, because the airline will have value and we'll have something to sell. When people say I got frustrated, I didn't really. The instruction that I received from government was to sell the airline. When we got into a position where we had something to sell, they decided that they didn't want to sell. In my view, I'd done everything I'd been asked to do. I spent 25 years in Aer Lingus and had a great time. But it was time for me to move on, because I think I was becoming, certainly in government circles, probably a problem rather than an asset. So I didn't want to do that, and I left not knowing what to do. And Stephen will tell you, I think Stephen and I went out for a drink on the Friday. I left, and I got approached by BA shortly after that. And the rest, as they say, is history. 9/11, everybody knows Aer Lingus was in very, very poor shape, and we had to take radical action. And I always remember doing an interview with RTE. I think it was a radio interview where I was saying, this is the worst the airline industry has ever seen. This is a major crisis. We're all struggling. And O'Leary did an interview, maybe the same day or maybe the day after, where he said, what crisis? He said, this is the best opportunity. And I can remember listening to him and going, wow, here we are. We're on our knees. We're counting every penny. As Stephen knows, we sold the paintings off the walls of the head office, anything we could. Steve Hazy, actually, I give him credit, although I still pay for it. He came to our rescue. We did a sale and leaseback on a few aircraft when nobody else wanted to talk to us. Nobody wanted to talk to us, and that's why we remember our friends. And Steve, if I ever forget, will remind me. But he flew in to sign the deal. And he can probably tell you the serial numbers of the aircraft and the engines, but without that, because that was cash that we desperately needed. But I can remember O'Leary taking the complete opposite view. Here's opportunity. And if you remember, he went out and ordered I can't remember, was it 100 737s or 200 737s? And I thought, so this was a real wake-up call to us in Aer Lingus, that things had changed, and now was the time for us to be very different. We couldn't react in the way we traditionally reacted. We couldn't wait for the recovery. We had to make a difference. And I think, to be honest, that's what the team that I was with at the time, I think that's what we did. Aer Lingus is the most profitable part of the business in margin terms, which is always very important, because clearly BA is bigger. But if you look at, I rate performance on margin, and if you look at our businesses, it's Aer Lingus actually that's the star performer. No pressure on Sean, who's taking over from Stephen. I think Aer Lingus has done a great job, but it's very tough, and we do benefit from having fierce competition from Ryanair on our doorstep. So it really does help to focus the mind when you're facing daily competition from somebody like that. But I think Aer Lingus deserves great credit, everybody there, for the way it stood up to the challenge, transformed itself, and is performing very strongly. The rebranding, I think, is great. I think it captures the traditional value of the Aer Lingus brand and modernises it, which is important. People probably don't remember, but back when we were trying to restructure Aer Lingus back in 2001, 2002, and we were desperate to do anything, one of the things we were trying to do is promote airlingus.com as a sales channel, and we repainted a couple of 737s. I think we probably sold them to Steve, actually, but we repainted them with just big, gaudy airlingus.com on the aircraft. But what we hadn't, and we didn't organise this, but I have to say it was a piece of media genius that it worked out this way, that the first aircraft came out of the hangar in this new scheme on St. Patrick's Day. And the thing about it was, when I showed Tom Mulcahy, who was the chairman, I showed him this new livery that just had airlingus.com. And he said, wow, he said, that's very powerful. But he said, where's the shamrock? And I said, Tom, that's the very story. You know, there is no shamrock. And he goes, wow, that's a brave decision. So, so being the smart guy I am, I thought, I think there's a hint there. So we painted a tiny shamrock on one of the engine nacelles, so that if we did get criticised, there's no shamrock in the aircraft, we could say, no, there is. You know, you have to look for it. But we took the shamrock off, and we took it off for a reason. We took it off to make an impact. And you know, you would not do that. When you look at the brand today, you know, the shamrock is just always, it has been associated. Yeah, you know. So I think the rebranding that Stephen and Sean have done recently, I think is a credit to British Airways that they have been prepared to take in people who weren't British to run the business. So we've since Rod Eddington, there's been a succession of non-British people. Some better than others, obviously. But, you know, it's that classic case of, you know, we used to get it in Ireland with Aer Lingus, and maybe you get it a little bit today. You know, you are there, you're a very important brand. People have this sense of ownership because of the history and the legacy, and you still get that a bit in BA. Even though BA was privatised in 1987, you know, you still get people who think they own a bit of BA and therefore have an opinion, and their opinion is as important and equal to everybody else's. You know, I personally don't get you know, worried about what I read in the newspapers. No disrespect to the journalists here present, but you know, they do a terrible job. So you know, you can't. One thing I've always said to people is you cannot run your business to satisfy the press, because they have a different job. Their job is to write stories that will entertain people, and therefore, you know, that's a different challenge. And people love reading stories about British Airways. You know, when Paul Dacre used to be the editor of the Daily Mail, he's recently retired, I used to have lunch with Paul every 6 months or so. And he told me, he said, if there's a story about BA, we'll put it on the front page. It doesn't matter what story it is. He said, the equivalent story about one of your competitors, we won't write it because nobody's interested. So, you know, there's great value in that because the brand is incredibly resilient. Incredibly resilient. And although people will criticise some of the things BA might do, they also love what it is. But the truth of it is, it's no different to anybody else. You know, you've got to change. And, you know, BA in particular, you know, if they ever build a third runway, which I still have my doubts about, you know, will face new and additional competition. So they've got to go through this change now when they can. Mm-hmm. So that they're prepared. And to be fair, you know, what we're seeing the fruits of it. You know, our net promoter score is absolutely, it's way ahead of where we thought it would be. You know, we've invested in the product, the customer service is improving, punctuality, regularity, all the basics of the industry are doing incredibly well. And that's what's important. So, you know, I'm very pleased with the way BA is performing. I do point out, and I do this, I think we might have one or two late to the game, you know, and it was clear that consolidation was happening around us. And the advantage of being late to the game was that we were able to see where others had done things well and see where others had, in our opinion, made some mistakes. And there'd always been a close link between BA and Iberia. Like I will be honest, I think the deal that BA should have done, and I believe had I been involved would have done, was KLM. You know, and that deal didn't happen. I regret it, and you know, I think had KLM and BA got together, I think that would have been a fantastic development. You know, there was a lot of tension at the time as to what that would mean. 2 hubs, Amsterdam and Heathrow. You know, was BA going to try and destroy the Amsterdam hub? You know, and you see today what, you know, multiple hubs can do. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not saying Iberia was a second choice. It wasn't. Iberia was the right choice, and creating IAG was definitely the right decision as well. And we created IAG with a view to further consolidation. We always said that BA and Iberia together was not the end game. It was just the start, and hence the reason we didn't call it BA Iberia or Iberia BA. We created this new, very boring name to focus the airlines on the brands, but to allow us to pursue further consolidation. Very well. We were doing exceptionally well until the devaluation of the Argentinian peso, because we put a lot of capacity into Argentina. So we started with 3 flights a week out of Barcelona to Buenos Aires. We increased to 9 flights a week, and the more capacity we put in, the more people. It was just incredible. But the currency there is devalued by 40%, so that's a challenge, and we will have to adjust our capacity to deal with that. But in the main, though, we're very pleased with the way it's operating. It is a very challenging segment of the market, because you have to be incredibly focused on cost, and we have very, very aggressive cost targets for level, and we're very close to our target, but we're not there yet, which means we still have more to do. But I can tell you, our cost and level is tiny compared to people who are trying to compete in that. So unless you have low cost, you can't make money in that segment of the market.
And that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Elusive profitability in that segment, as you said.
Yeah, there's a lot of demand, but to make money, you're going to have to be low cost, and it's much more. It's different to the short haul low cost. So obviously, we started earlier in Barcelona, and there's less. We got a lot of coverage in Barcelona because long haul out of Barcelona was definitely underserved. There's a lot more competition in Paris, but no, there's not a lot of difference. You've got to give a lot of credit to Tony Ryan, for the leasing industry, and I think you do have to give credit to successive Irish politicians who recognise that this was an opportunity for Ireland to attract a new industry into the country, and they've done extremely well with that. I know some of you will have heard me say this before. O'Leary was asked this question, and he said, no, it's a simple answer. He said, the airline industry is full of liars, bullshitters, and drunks. And he said, in Ireland, we excel at all 3. But no, I think aviation has always been important to Ireland as an island economy, and I think Aer Lingus a critical part of the Irish economy. But I think the reason there's such a focus on aviation in Ireland is probably because of Tony Ryan and the creation of GPA and what he did and what came out of that industry. So I would give probably most of the credit. When people look at the US, they're looking at a domestic market.
Big domestic market.
Yeah. So if you look at US carriers internationally, it's quite fragmented, as you would expect. But there has been more consolidation in the industry. There will be failures. We've seen recently a number of airlines who have really struggled. And will continue to struggle, even those that I've seen mentioned in terms of potential deals and rescues, they're fundamentally unfit to operate in the market today. So we will still see consolidation. We'll see some of these airlines disappear, and we'll see further M&A activity. The pace and the scale of it is anybody's guess, but there has to be more consolidation in Europe. The industry is too fragmented, and there are too many airlines that are incapable of making a return that will justify, the investment that is required. I think the industry is in good shape, actually. It's been good in recent years, and I think it's going to get better with further consolidation. People looking at parallels to what we did with Aer Lingus and Norwegian are misguided. It's very different. The companies were very different targeted. Our ambition, very different as well. I like Norwegian, like the brand. Bjorn, I think, has done a fantastic job. We bought a small stake, which we still hold, but I've been very clear that if we don't progress to a full takeover, well, then we're not going to retain a stake in Norwegian. So there's not a lot more I can say, but if you've looked at the evolution of the Norwegian share price in recent months, it's been on a pretty constant decline. There was a little bit of interest in it last week when there was speculation, I think, that somebody was going to bid against us. I've been very clear, if somebody wants to bid against us, I'm not getting into a bidding war, so we've got, if anybody wants to buy shares in Norwegian, just make us an offer. but we're not going to get into a bidding war. We know what the value of Norwegian is to us. We're very clear on that, and it's not a deal that we have to do. So we'll wait and see what happens. But I think you're going to get clarity on it in the very near future. I said last August that the issue was going to be resolved within 12 months, and when you say within 12 months, you don't mean it's going to take 12 months. So we'll see what happens. I think Bjorn's a fantastic guy. I've great admiration for him. I think he's done an incredible job building up that business. And they have proven that the consumer will buy into the concept. They've struggled to make it financially successful. I've personally taken the view that the 787 was the wrong aircraft for them. I think we've gone with the A330-200 in level because when you look at ownership costs and you compare that to the cost of fuel, you need a very, very high fuel price for the 787 to offset the difference in the ownership cost. I reminded people, we had a 15% stake in Flybe through, we sold BA Connect to Flybe. I always think sell, you use that term sell. In the dictionary probably means you get something in return for it. My memory of that selling BA Connect to Flybe was we had to give them a big check as well. But, through that transaction, we acquired a 15% stake in Flybe, which we sold subsequently. And from memory, I think we sold at £1.15 a share. The shares were trading then they were down to about 10p. So, no. It's a very, very tough segment of the market, and I think everybody who knows Flybe would say that it can survive in its current form, even if that takeover goes ahead. And I'm not sure. I know that there's some rumours about some of the shareholders challenging it, but if it does, it's not going to survive in its current size. And probably with the fleet of aircraft that it has doesn't make sense either. But there's a role for these carriers, but not with the scale that I'd like to think that they will. I read something in the paper that he was up in front of some government committee or parliamentary committee being challenged. I wish him well. I think he's got his work cut out for him. I think, as I said before, I think KLM is a great airline. I struggle to understand why they needed to go outside of the group. I'm not being critical of Ben. When in Peter Elber, they had, in my opinion, one of the best CEOs in the industry. But they didn't appoint him to run the group. I think they should have, because he's clearly demonstrated that he can do it and do it very well at KLM. So the challenge with Air France is clearly one that is influenced by politics, and with the government holding a stake in Air France. And I suspect even if they didn't hold a stake, there'd still be a political challenge. And my experience is that governments don't make good shareholders. They are very poor when it comes to giving you commercial advice. So I've never listened to them. And and quite honestly, in our industry, in the airline industry, it's such a challenging industry that you've got to be prepared to take tough decisions, and often those tough decisions will not be helpful or will be welcomed by governments. So I don't know Ben very well. I have spoken to him. I think it is probably a signal of change that they've appointed somebody who's not French. But I do wish him well. But I think he's got his work cut out for him. I think Lufthansa, are doing a good job. They've clearly got challenges as well. But Carsten has gone through a very tough time, and to his credit, he's been brave and he stood firm, and I admire that because he came under a lot of pressure, which is unusual in sort of Germany to get the sort of criticism that he did. But he stood firm, and he was very fortunate that his board stood with him, and he's got through some very significant challenges. So I think he does deserve credit. For us, it's very simple. Everyone in this room flies in an airplane. What everyone in this room doesn't really see is how much it costs to operate at an airport. And airport operators think it's insignificant. I can remember seeing successive airport CEOs saying airport charges are an insignificant part. Yeah, that is total bullshit. It's a really important part of our cost. And it's a cost that we demand better service for, and we're not prepared to pay more money for additional infrastructure when the airports have been doing incredibly well in terms of their returns. So they've made a lot of money off the hard work that airlines do. And we just want to see greater efficiency. We want to see people focus on investing for the right reason rather than, and I suppose if I was running an airport, I'd probably do what they do, because they get rewarded on the amount of money they spend, not on the amount of money they make. As a regulated entity, the more money they spend, the more money they're guaranteed to make. That's perverse. So we can't afford to allow airports to do that, and that's why we are working carefully. I think the management team at Dublin is very focused on this and recognises it, because for Dublin to be successful, the airlines have to be successful at Dublin, and the only way we can do that is if we continue to be attractive to our customers and offer them fares that they're prepared. Yeah, I read the story, Ulick McAvady. So apparently I met him. I did meet him about 15 years ago.
Okay.
I don't think we talked about it. Maybe we did, but I haven't seen Ulick in about 15 years. We're not interested in a third terminal at Dublin Airport. I think Dublin is a great airport. It's clearly very important to us. And there are a lot of things that Dublin needs to do. And to be fair, the management team at DAA is focused on those issues. And we're not going to get sidetracked by a debate around should there be a privately owned terminal at Dublin. So we're not engaged at all. We're very much focused on making the infrastructure that we have at Dublin and the infrastructure that's in train with DAA work. And that's critical, because we take these A321 LRs and we're going to expand our transatlantic network, and we need to make sure that we've got the right infrastructure at the airport. And we're doing all of this well before there's a debate around the parallel runway, or whether that goes ahead, and I'm assuming it will. So we don't need more terminal capacity. We just need a little bit of investment in ground infrastructure at the airport that will facilitate the operation of Dublin Airport as a hub. And building another terminal building at Heathrow, when they built Terminal 4, away from everything else where you had to cross runways, it doesn't make sense.
No.
So it's not going to, I can't see how it would necessarily work for us. So Heathrow has never had to go out and get a customer, because they've got a queue of customers who are trying to get in. And therefore, they don't have any commercial nous, in my opinion. I went to Heathrow a number of years ago, and I told them that I would take all of our operations, our long-haul operations of Gatwick, and move them into Heathrow. But to do that, they needed to give me a deal, because the average price per passenger, sorry, if I'm in Dublin as a guest, but if I'm in London as a passenger, is £7 at Gatwick, and it's £22 at Heathrow. So I said, look, I'm not going to move all of this activity to Heathrow and increase my charges. So give me a deal. They didn't know how. I may as well have had two heads. They just didn't know how to respond to that. And Heathrow needs, and will need to do so with a third runway. They're going to have to take a completely different. Yeah, I'd like to think 2019 won't be worse than 2018. Won't be, and I think 2020 will see some improvement. I don't think we're going to see much in terms of improvement in 2019, because part of the problem is, air traffic control providers have not invested in the right resources to ensure that they can deal with the capacity. Indeed, some ATC providers assumed that aviation was going to decline and therefore reduce their resources, which was a crazy thing to do. So we've had a complete disconnect in terms of capacity that's gone through Europe compared to the available capacity that air traffic control providers can deal with. So that can be resolved. It just requires a bit of focus. But we'll see some focus in 2019, but 2020, I think. The aircraft, they're way too expensive. But apart from that, the aircraft are great. We're very pleased. We're in negotiations with Boeing and Airbus, GE and Rolls-Royce. Separate negotiations with the engine manufacturers and the airframe. But I think the technology is definitely improving significantly. The 777X is clearly something we're interested in. The A350-1000, we have 18 of them on order with British Airways. Take the first of them in a couple of months' time. We've got the 350-900 with Iberia. So we're big enough to have reason to have good hard negotiations with all of the suppliers. And the short haul. To be honest, my biggest regret is that I think I think we should be doing more with Boeing. I think the 737 is a great aircraft. I'm biased in that, you know, I flew it, but you know, I think there are opportunities for us to look at that aircraft again rather than solely look at the A320 family aircraft. So you know, that's one of the things we are going to be looking at as a group as well. Not through this current phase, but in the near future, we're going to start looking at the short haul aircraft again. And clearly, you've got the 220, which we did look at with Bombardier when it was the C series. Pricing was just not right for us at the time. So yeah, I think there's good opportunity, and we're clearly interested, and you know, we're interested in new and in second-hand aircraft. I think there's some great value in this. You know, we've always taken second-hand narrow-body aircraft, and we've taken second-hand wide-body aircraft in Aer Lingus and indeed in Iberia as well. So you know, BA has traditionally bought their long-haul aircraft, wide-body aircraft, new, and operated them for their full economic life. Times have changed, and you know, there's good value in the market for some very good aircraft at the moment. So you know, we are looking at second-hand aircraft. The issue of reconfiguration costs is clearly a challenge.
I was going to ask you, commonality.
Yeah, but again, I think we're getting better at that as well, and you know, we can be more aggressive in terms of what we actually need. So you know, there's opportunities for us there. You know, we ordered 18 A350-1000s as 747 replacements. As you know, I think we're down to 33 747s at the moment, and they will be retired over the next 4 years. So we've got to replace those aircraft. Some of those will be replaced with the 350-1000, but we're also looking to expand. You know, we've got a lot of slots at Heathrow that we're operating short-haul aircraft with, which are designed to move to long-haul. So, you know, we will be looking at a lot of wide-body aircraft, and then we've got to start replacing the 777-200s. So, you know, we're in the market. You know, don't come to us if you're not prepared to negotiate really attractive pricing, but, you know, well, you know, they're not aggressive enough. No, it's a great aircraft. It's worked exceptionally well for us. The 12, we're very pleased. We've always said we could see a fleet, 20, maybe more aircraft in the fleet. But the issue, and this is part of our assessment, you know, we've got to look at, what would we do in an economic downturn? So when we model the sort of 2008, 2009 downturn, and we look at where those aircraft would operate and how they would operate, and to make sense of it, we would need much lower ownership costs, and we haven't seen that from Airbus. So, no, unless there's a change of attitude, I can't see us buying new A380s from Airbus. I'm not saying no. Sorry, I did say no. Yeah, I did say no. You know, we've never been fans, principally because you end up with a very niche fleet for a very niche market. I can understand Australia, you know, Qantas, they are sort of a little bit further away from everybody else than we are. So, you know, getting an aircraft that works for us, I can't see us focusing on an ultra long haul aircraft when we've got so much of our network that wouldn't require it. And having these small niche fleets doesn't tend to work very well. So I think it's right for Qantas. I don't believe it would be right for us. So we're not focused on it. I think it's fair to say that nobody would like to see Qatar leave. But quite honestly, I'd be very surprised if they don't. You know, I speak to Akbar a lot. He doesn't make these comments unless he's genuine about them, and he's clearly annoyed with the cooperation that he's getting from some of the Oneworld carriers. And I can understand that, you know, when he sees Oneworld carriers working cooperatively with his Middle East competitors, but not with him. It sort of undermines the concept of the alliance. Nobody wants to see him leave. But I think if Oneworld is to retain Qatar, I think there will have to be a change in attitude. For us, you know, we work closely with them, and we will continue to work closely with Qatar, whether they're in or out of the alliance. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Oneworld Alliance, in that we're quite flexible about working with people who are not members of the alliance, unlike some of our competitive alliance. So, you know, it would be a pity to see them leave. But I can, if I were in Akbar's position, I'd probably take a similar view. We've had to deal with complexity in this industry for many, many years, and we managed to deal with it. And I don't see this as being any different. So, ultimately, we'll work through this. It may add a bit of complexity. We've got a complex structure anyway, because, as I point out to people, a lot of parts of the world don't recognise this concept of EU ownership and control. So, we've had to put structures in place. But I'm confident that there will be a comprehensive agreement between the UK and the EU on aviation. I think it's in everybody's interest that happens. And, where people have expressed concerns previously, for example, that the UK has to negotiate with the US. As you know, we've negotiated an open skies agreement between the UK and the US now. So I believe that these issues will all be resolved in due course. No, and to be fair to Chris Grayling, and I stay in touch with him a lot, the Secretary of State for Transport in the UK. He's been very vocal. He sees the concept of ownership and control as being ridiculous. So I think the UK has always taken a progressive attitude, much more so than many other countries. But ultimately, I believe that these issues will be resolved.